Apple have just announced their brand new UI style. And in this video, I'll show you how to create liquid glass animations in After Effects. Make sure to watch till the end, as I'll reveal animation secrets that will take you to the next level. The assets for this project can be found in my Discord server. Let's get started. Alright, so first I'm going to show you how to achieve the liquid glass look in After Effects. And then we'll recreate this animation, which includes shape morphing, smooth transitions, and a few other advanced techniques. Creating the liquid glass look is pretty simple. There are multiple different ways you could go about it, and every tutorial will show you something different. This is how I do it. Let's start off by creating a new composition. So go to Composition, New Comp, and we can just name this Liquid Glass Example. 1920 by 1080, 30 frames, and duration can be however long you'd like. Then we can hit OK to create our comp. I'm also going to import one of our backgrounds so I can show you how it looks better. And let's just scale this down a little. Cool. Alright, so let's start by creating our shape. I'm going to go up to the shape tool and create a rectangle. Something like that. Then we can align it using the align panel. And I'm going to increase the roundness so that we can have rounded corners. Perfect. Let's rename this layer to main shape. And now we can start applying our glass effect. First, let's add an adjustment layer to our comp. So layer new and adjustment layer. And I'm going to rename this to glass. Then from the effects and presets panel, we're going to search for CC glass. And just drag it on to our adjustment layer. Now, as you can see, it's already started affecting our comp, but we're going to need to change a few settings. Open up the surface tab within CC glass and change the bump map to our main shape. So I'm going to press this drop down and then select main shape. We can leave the property as lightness, but we're going to need to change some of these settings. I'm going to make the softness 25, the height 60, and we can leave the displacement as it is. And let's also track map this adjustment layer to our main shape. That way it only stays within the boundaries of this shape. And here you can see it's coming along quite nicely. Let's go back to the adjustment layer and we're going to need to change these light settings. Instead of using the effect light, we're going to be using After Effects lights. So press the drop down and change it to AE lights. Now, since we don't have any lights in this scene, you'll notice that nothing has happened. So let's add one. Go to Layer, New, and then Light. We'll use an ambient light, which means there will be light everywhere. Set the color to white and the intensity to 200%. Then hit OK to create it. And now we can drag this light layer to the bottom. In After Effects, lights only affect 3D layers. So we can press the main shape and make it 3D. That's the main glass effect complete. And if we move the shape around, you can see that it refracts the background quite nicely. We still need to style this shape a bit more. So I'm going to duplicate this main shape layer and we can turn it back on and we're going to add a stroke. So press enter and rename this layer to stroke. Then we can drag it above the glass layer, open up the settings, open contents, rectangle 1, and we can hide the fill option and turn on the stroke option. Open up the stroke settings and change the stroke width to 2. And then we can go into the layer's blending modes and change it to overlay. Let's also reduce the opacity of this layer by hitting T and change it to 50%. So now we've got a cool stroke around our shape, which also reacts to the background colors. We can also add a drop shadow to our shape. Let's duplicate main shape again, turn it on, and we can rename this to drop shadow. Drag this layer underneath main shape, and we're going to add a few effects to this layer. First, let's search up fill, and drag that on. I'm just going to make this black, and then we can add a fast box blur, and increase the blur radius until you're happy with it. So I would say about 40%. And then we can add a transform effect. And we can use this to adjust the position and lower it slightly. Something like that. We can also reduce the opacity from here. So I'll just drag it down to about 35%. Lastly, we can track matte this drop shadow to our main shape. Then we can invert it by pressing this button, and that way our drop shadow is only underneath the shape. And that's a pretty cool looking glass effect. There are a lot of different ways that Apple uses liquid glass. Sometimes it's clear, and sometimes the background is blurred. To achieve this blurred look, we can add a Gaussian or a fast box blur to our glass layer. I'm going to search up Gaussian blur and drag it on to our glass adjustment layer. Then we can increase this amount to, let's say, 27, 28, and that'll just give our shape a blurry effect. You could also add a brightness and contrast if you wanted to make it lighter or darker. Now you're probably wondering how we can animate this main shape layer and also affect the drop shadow and the stroke layers. And there's an easy way to do this. That's with property links. As of now, there are no property links. So if I open up this rectangle path and change the size, you can see that our stroke and our drop shadow remains exactly where they are. We can use property links to link the properties of the stroke layer and the drop shadow layer to these values here. And that way, when I increase the size or change the roundness, the stroke and the drop shadow will be affected. Let me show you how it's done. First, I'm going to increase the size of the timeline so you guys can see a bit better. Let's open up this stroke settings, contents, rectangle 1, and rectangle path 1. As you can see, we've got size, position, and roundness here. Besides size, there's a whip icon. We can drag this whip icon onto the size of the main shape. And now if I change the size of the main shape, it will also affect the stroke. The main shape layer acts as our controller, and the stroke follows with the values that it's been linked to. So let's link the position and also the roundness. You will know that it's linked because the values have turned red. Now let's do the same for the drop shadow. So I'm going to close this stroke layer and open the drop shadow, contents, rectangle 1, rectangle path 1, and we can link these values up. So now let's close this, and we could drag this down. Right, so I'm just gonna do a simple scale animation, something like that. As you can see, everything is linked together. That's the power of property links. Now here's one thing you should know. Even though we link the properties, if I move this main shape layer, the stroke and the drop shadow won't follow. That's because we linked the properties of the shape within this layer, but we haven't linked the layers together. So to do that, we can select the drop shadow and the stroke, and we can use the whip under parent and link and drag it over to the main shape. And now when we move this main shape, everything else moves with it. We could add one more effect to make this look a bit better, and that's an edge glow. The good thing is, if we duplicate this drop shadow, all the property links will stay linked. As you can see, they're still red. I'm going to drag this duplicated drop shadow layer to the top. We can delete all of the effects inside. Let's also remove the track matte. So I'm going to set no matte, and let's rename this to edge glow. In the effects and presets tab, I'm going to search for CC light sweep. Drag this onto our edge glow layer. Then we can change the center to the middle of our shape. We can change the shape type to smooth, the width to 100, the sweep intensity to 0, the edge intensity to 60, and the edge thickness to about 3. And then change light reception to cutout. And now you can see that we've got this cool edge glow on our shape. We could animate the direction, so set a keyframe at 0, go to 1, and then I'm going to type in 1 here so it does 1 rotation. And now we've got a nice little light sweep on our shape. If you're finding this video helpful so far, then be sure to hit the subscribe button. And if you want to master After Effects and land high-paying clients, sign up to the Editing Launchpad. I'll be releasing it very soon, so let me know in the comments below if you're looking forward to it. Alright, let's get into the animation. I've created a few assets for us to use to speed up the process. I've provided these for free in my Discord server, so make sure to join if you're following along. If you're wondering how I created these, then you can watch my previous video on creating UIs. Let's head to After Effects. And here are all the assets. We've got AI files and PSD files so that we can replace the text. Let's start by importing the Camera UI AI file. So I'm going to drag it into my project panel. I'm going to change the import kind to composition so that we get access to all of our layers, and then hit OK. Then we can group this up into a folder, and I'll just name that one Camera UI AI. Then we've got the Camera UI PSD, so let's drag that in. I'm going to change the import kind for the Photoshop files to composition retain layer sizes. Then hit OK. We can group these two layers into a folder and name that one Camera UI PSD. Now let's do the same for these 4 files. So iOS cool, then the PSD, then the music player, then the PSD. Then we can import the images. I'm going to unselect background free because we've imported it already. And let's just drag those in. Cool, we've got all of our assets imported. Now let's create a new composition. So I'm going to go to composition, new comp. We can just name this liquid glass animation, 1920 by 1080, 30 frames and 10 seconds. Then hit OK to create. Now let's open up the Camera UI AI file and the Camera UI PSD. I'm going to open up this text layer, T video, and copy the Photoshop file into our AI composition. Then I can right click, create, convert to editable text, and delete the video text layer from the AI file. Let's do the same for the photo. So I'm going to go into T photo in our Photoshop one and paste it into our AI one. And then we can right click, convert to editable text, and delete the photo text layer. So in this file, we've got 2 different shapes. We've got our main shapes, which is all of these. And then we've got our selection shape, which is this one. I've merged all of these shapes into one layer so that we can apply the gloss effect one time and it will be applied to all of these. Let's right click, press create, and then create shapes from vector layers. This will convert this layer into an After Effects shape layer, so we have a few more options. Then we can delete this shapes layer. And let's do the same for the selection. So select the selection, right click, create shapes from vector layer, and then delete the selection layer. For these 2 layers, make sure you have continuously rasterized turned on. If you don't know what this does, let me show you. If I have it turned off and scale up the button, you can see that we've got jagged edges. But if I turn it on, now our edges are completely smooth. So I'm going to put that back and make sure it's turned on. And lastly, let's just make all of these layers 3D. Then I'm going to select the very top layer, hold shift and select the bottom layer, and we can copy these layers over into our main comp. Now let's import our first background. So I'm going to drag background 1 to the very bottom, and I'm going to scale it down to about like 50%. We also need to import our stock image one and put it inside of this circle. So I'm going to drag that just above the rotate icon and track mat it to our shapes outlines. And then we can scale it down and fit it within this circle. So hit S for scale, put it down, and just drag it in place. Perfect. Let's re-enable the shapes outlines layer. Now we can apply the gloss effect to our shapes outlines layer. First, let's create an adjustment layer. So layer, new, adjustment layer. I'm going to drag this just above shape outlines and rename this to gloss. Then we can add CC gloss. And let's set this up just like we did in the first example. So for surface, we're going to change the bump map to our shape, which is shape outlines, and the number is 8. So we can open this drop down and select number 8. And we can change the softness to 25, the height to 60, and we can leave the displacement as 100. Then we've got our light options. We're going to change the effect light to AE lights, and we're going to need to add a light source. So go to layer, new, and then light, ambient light, color white and intensity 200%. Hit OK, and we can drag this to the bottom. We only need to add this ambient light one time to our composition. You can see, because we have 3D layers enabled, it's affecting all of our layers. If the light is ever affecting a layer and you don't want it to, such as this rotate icon, for example, you can open it up, open material options, and then you can turn accept light to off. And now it won't affect this rotate icon. And then we can press material options, Command C to copy, and select all of the layers you don't want it to affect. So for us, that's going to be photo, video, and button. And then press Command V to paste. Now we can track matte this glass effect to our shape outlines. So let's select this whip and drag it to shape outlines. And hide this layer so we only get the glass effect. We're going to add a few more effects to this glass layer. So let's add a Gaussian blur. And I'm going to set the blurriness to about 25. And we can also add a brightness and contrast because we want to make this part a little darker. So I'm going to drag the brightness down to about -20. Now we also need to add the stroke and the drop shadow. So let's duplicate the shape's outlines, rename it to stroke, and I'm going to duplicate it again and rename that to drop shadow. Let's drag the drop shadow underneath shape outlines and the stroke above the glass adjustment layer. Let's turn both of these on. So for the drop shadow, I'm going to go back to our example, press on the drop shadow here and copy these effects. And let's go back and paste it on our drop shadow. Then we can track matte it to shape's outlines and invert the track matte. For the stroke, let's open it up, contents. We're going to have to do this for each one. So let's just open all of these up and hide the fill. So I'm going to hide the fill for all of the shapes. Then besides add, we're going to add a stroke, and let's drag this stroke out to the bottom. Just like that. And we can leave it at 100% and color white. Then let's set the blending mode to overlay, hit T to open the opacity and set it to 50%. And now we've got our glass effect set up. Let's recolor these 4 layers so we know that these are the glass layers. So I'm just going to change it to peach. Or actually, let's make it purple. So before we start animating, we need to make sure that we have our property link set up for the stroke and the drop shadow. For the animation, we're going to have this menu section expand, and we're also going to have these 2 circles move to either side. So we're going to need to link the menu's path, and we're also going to need to link these circles transform positions. So I'm going to open up shape outlines, contents. Now we've got group 1, group 2, group 3, and group 4. If you press it, it will show you which one's selected. So group 1 is our menu. Let's open that up and then open up path 1. Here's our path that we need everything linked to. So I'm going to open this up. Let's open stroke, contents, group 1, and path 1. And let's drag this whip over onto path 1 of our shapes outlines. And then we can do the same for the drop shadow. So open up the drop shadow, open up contents, group 1, path 1, and let's drag this whip over to shapes outlines, path 1, path. So we've got our path linked, and now let's link the transform positions of these 2 circles. So I'm going to close group 1. This circle is group 2. So I'm going to open group 2 in our shapes outlines, and then I'm going to open transform because we're going to be changing this position. So now let's go to our stroke, open group 2, transform, and we can drag the whip besides position over to this one. And now let's do the same for group 2 of our drop shadow. So transform, position, and drag this over here. Now the entire effect should be linked to this circle. Lastly, we need to do the same for the rotate button, and that would be group 3. So I'm going to close all of these, open up group 3 of our shapes outlines, open up transform. This is the position we want everything to link to. So let's open up group 3 in our stroke, transform, and drag the whip from position over to this one. And then the same for the drop shadow. So link that. And now we're all set up with our links. Let's start with our first animation, which is the expansion of this menu. I'm going to zoom into the timeline and we can go up to about 5 frames so our animation doesn't start right away. Then let's open up the shape outlines, contents, group 1, which is our menu, path 1, and set a keyframe for the path. Then we can go up to about 1 second. We're going to need to expand this path on either side. So I'm going to zoom in a bit here. I'm going to press off of the layer, and this will allow me to select each of these points. Hold shift while selecting, so you can select these 3, and let's drag it over until it reaches this point, just like that. Then we can do the same for this side. So I'm going to select the first point and then hold shift and drag this over, just like that. So this is what we've got. Cool. We also want these circles to move over. I'm going to have this one move over to the left by 400 pixels and this one move to the right by 400 pixels. So let's just open this up a bit. Our photo section is group 2 and our rotate is group 3. So I'm going to open up group 2, transform, and set a keyframe for the position. Then I'll open up group 3, transform, and set a keyframe for the position. Then we can hit U to reveal all of the properties that we've modified. We also need to move this picture and this rotate icon as well. So I'm going to select the rotate icon and the picture layer or the image layer, hit P to open position, and set a keyframe for these positions. Then we can go over to 1 second and move these over by 400 pixels. So first up, we've got group 2, which is our photo. And to move something over by a set value, you can press on the value, press right on your keyboard to go to the end, and then type in -400. And that will move our shape by 400 pixels. We could do the same for group 3, which is this button. So I'm going to press this value right on my keyboard. And because we're going right, we're going to type in +400. And let's just do the same for the rotate icon. So press this value, +400 to move it to the right. And the image, press the value, -400 to move it to the left. Now we've got this. Lastly, we can easy ease these keyframes. So highlight them and then press F9 to easy ease. Let's go into the graph editor and just drag in these points a little. So I'm going to drag this one to about here and the right side a bit more to about here. So now it's going to start off slowly, speed up, and then slow down. Here's how it looks. Now let's set up a glass effect for the selection outlines layer, which is this shape. So we can do this quite quickly since we've already done it once. Let's duplicate this glass adjustment layer, place it above selection outlines, track matte it to selection outlines, go into the CC glass, go into surface, and change the bump map to selection outlines, which is number 5. So I'm going to press the drop down and select number 5. And then we can duplicate this layer twice, name one stroke, and name one drop shadow. I'm going to drag drop shadow beneath selection outlines and the stroke above the glass adjustment layer. Turn both of them on. We can go to our previous drop shadow layer and copy over these settings, paste it on drop shadow, track matte it to selection outlines and invert it. Then we can go into our stroke, contents, group 1, turn off the fill, add a stroke effect, make sure it's 2 pixels width, change the blending mode to overlay, and then hit T for opacity and change it to 50. For the glass effect, I'm actually going to increase the brightness of this layer. So let's change that to 30. And we can also decrease the contrast a bit so it pops a little more. Maybe about -10. Since we're not going to do any shape morphing or any advanced techniques, we can simply select the stroke and the drop shadow, and by using the parent and link, we can just link it to our selection outlines layer. Now when we move it around, everything is linked together. Now let's sort out the text. We've only got 2 text options here, but we need a few more. I'm going to do this in a very non-elegant way, but it will get the job done. First, let's duplicate this video text layer. And I'm going to drag it over to the left, and we can just change that to cinematic. Then we can select the shape tool, and I'm going to zoom in a bit between video and photo, and let's create a shape between these 2 points. This is going to act as our spacer, and it will show us how much space we need between the text. So let's drag this besides video and then select the cinematic text. Whilst holding shift to keep it locked on an axis, we're going to drag it up to the edge of this shape. Just like that. So we've got our cinematic text here, but it says video too. So you can press enter and then backspace and then enter, and it will take on the text that's actually written here. So I'm going to duplicate this cinematic text, drag it beneath photo because we're going to add a text here, drag that to the right, and let's rename this to portrait. And then we can take our spacer, move it to the edge of photo, and then we can select this, move it up. And let's duplicate our text one more time, drag that to the bottom, move it over. And this one I'm going to type in panorama. So panorama. And we can just use this again. All right, perfect. Now we can just delete the spacer because we won't be needing it anymore. Let's link all of these text layers up to their own null object. I'm going to select the top text, layer, new, and then null object. Let's rename this to text null. And then we can select all of our text layers. And under parent and link, we can drag it over to the text null. I'm just going to turn on 3D for this as well. Now when we move this null object, our text layers will move as well. We also need to make sure that these text layers are within this menu object. But if we track matted it to this shape, we would also see it in these circles. We're going to need to duplicate shape's outlines, and let's rename that to text mask. Then I'm going to open it up, and we know group 1 is the menu. So let's delete all of these other groups. And now we can select our text layers and track map them to the text mask, and they'll stay within the menu. Now let's create one more null object that will link the selection and the text together. First though, I'm gonna select these 4 layers because this is our second glass object, and we can change the color so it's easier to read. All right, and now let's create our null object. I'm just gonna drag it under here and rename that to slider null. Since we've linked the stroke and the drop shadow to our selection, we can link the selection to our slider null, and this should move our slider. And now we can also link the text null to our slider null. This will make sure that the text and the selection moves together. Let's also make that 3D. Let's start animating these null objects. So I'm going to go to 5 frames, and we're going to press the slider null and hit P to open the position. Let's set a keyframe to set our start point, and then let's go to 1 second. So at 1 second, we want this selection to be in the very middle. There's different ways you could do this, but what I do is duplicate the selection outlines, which is the main shape. I'm going to drag it to the top, turn off 3D, and make it visible. Then I'm going to use the align panel to center it, and then we can zoom in a little, select the slider null, and make sure you unlink the slider null from here. And then we can move this position until our slider is in the very middle, just like that. And now we can delete this selection outlines that we made, and we should have our selection going to the middle of the menu. Now let's easy ease these keyframes. So highlight them and press F9, go into the graph editor, and let's just adjust these points a little. So something like this. Let's see how that looks. Cool. For our last movement animation, we're going to make these text objects slide to the right really fast, and that will transition us into our next scene. So I'm going to start this animation at about 15 frames. Select the text null and hit P for the position and set a keyframe. Then we can go to 1 second and change the position to about here. So we're going to have this, and I'm going to easy ease these keyframes. And for this one, we're going to do a really steep curve. So the right side can be pushed all the way to the edge, and the left side can be dragged all the way over. And this is what we've got. At this point, we want these layers to end. So I'm going to go 1 frame back, select all of these layers besides ambient light 1. I'm going to hold down Option or Alt for Windows, and then the right square bracket. And that will trim our layers to this point. So now once our animation is done, our layers will vanish. Let's make this text responsive. So whenever the text is selected inside of the selection, the text will turn yellow and the previous text will turn white. So I think about this point, the photo should be white and the portrait should be yellow. So I'm going to select photo and portrait. I'm going to select both of them, Command-Shift-D to split, and then we can zoom in a bit. Let's go to photo and copy this fill color. Then we can select the second portrait text and change the fill color to yellow. And we can select the second photo text and change the fill color to white. Now it looks like the portrait text is being selected. Lastly, let's do something with the background so it's not so static. I'm going to select the background, hit S to open up the scale, set a keyframe at the very start, and go to 1. Or I'll just go 1 frame before since we can't see it, and just zoom out a little to about here. And then we can just drag this keyframe over to the end. Let's see how that looks. Maybe that's a bit too much. I think 46 might be good. Yeah, that's looking good. Time for the second scene. I'm going to close all of these, go to project, and let's open up the iOS call AI and the iOS call PSD. I'm going to copy this text object to the AI file, and we're going to convert it to editable text. And then we can delete this layer here. Let's convert our box to a shape because we're going to be adding the gloss effect to this. And let's turn on continuously rasterize for this layer. Then we can make all of our layers 3D. Select the first one, hold Shift and select the bottom one, Command C to copy, go to our comp and Command V to paste. I'm going to go to 1 and press the left square bracket to bring the layers to your playhead. Let's make sure that these layers aren't being affected by the light. So I'm going to open it up, material options, accept light to off, copy this setting, and also paste it on our slide to answer. We're not going to apply it to the box outlines because this is going to have the gloss effect. Now, one more thing we need to import is the background. So I'm going to import background 2 and place it here. Then we can make it 3D, turn off accept lights, and scale it down slightly. I'm going to scale it down, and I'm also going to hit P and push it backwards. It will give us a parallax effect when things are moving. Let's create the glass effect for the box outlines. So I'm going to copy this glass adjustment layer from the one we did previously, Command D to duplicate, drag it above box outlines, left square bracket to bring the layer to the playhead. Let's track matte it to box outlines, open up the settings, surface, change the bump map to box outlines, which is number 4. And let's change some of these settings. For the softness, we can make it 35, height 60, displacement, we could increase a bit to about 180. Let's lower the blurriness to 15. And we can just turn off the brightness. Now let's duplicate box outlines twice. Name one of them stroke, one of them drop shadow. Drag the drop shadow under box outlines and the stroke above glass 3. Turn both the layers on. Let's copy the drop shadow settings from one of our previous ones. So Command C to copy, select drop shadow and paste. Track matte it to box outlines and then invert. And then for the stroke, let's select the stroke, contents, group 1, turn off the fill, add a stroke, change the blend mode to overlay, and the opacity to 50%. That's our glass setup for this section. And let's just select those layers and change the color to green. Now for the text, I'm going to change the color to white and the blend mode to, I think overlay looks quite cool. For this animation, the call button is going to remain in the center and everything else is going to be moving behind it. So that way it's going to look like we're sliding over to the right. So beneath the call button, above slide to answer, I'm going to select this layer and we're going to create a null object. Left square bracket to bring it to the playhead. And let's just rename this to call slider null. And let's link the stroke and the drop shadow parent and link it to the box outlines, and then link the box outlines to our new null object. And let's also link the background to and the text layer to the same null object. We need to make this call button go to the middle, so I'm going to turn off 3D for now and use the align panel to align it to the center. Then we could turn on 3D again. Now let's animate the position of this call slider so that it slides in just like that. So I'm going to set a keyframe for the position. Then we can go to 120 frames and let's move it over until our call button is in the right place. So about here, let's highlight these keyframes, hit F9 to easy ease them, go into the graph editor. Let's just give it a really steep curve. So I'm going to drag the left side all the way to the left and the right side all the way to the left as well. And let's see how that looks. Cool. That's exactly the effect we're going for. So this text speeds up and the call button starts at a very high speed and slows all the way down. Now let's just create an out animation for this section. So I'm just going to increase this layer length of the glass. Let's create a new null object. So layer, new null object, and let's go to 1, hit the left square bracket. I'm just going to name this call out animation. Going to make it 3D. We're going to link the call slider null, which controls everything besides the call button, and the call button to this null. So let's link that. Then we can go to about here. That would be 115. Hit S to open the scale. Set a keyframe for the scale. Then let's go to 2 seconds and decrease the scale to about here. We're going to need to adjust this background as we can see the edge. So I'm going to select the background, hit S, and increase the scale till we can't see it. So this is what we've got. Let's also easy ease the call out animation. So I'm going to select those layers, hit F9, go into the graph editor, and let's just max out this curve. That's looking cool. If you remember from before, we can go to our end keyframe, go 1 frame back, select all of our layers. Whilst holding Option or Alt, press the right square bracket, and that should trim all of our layers up to this point. All right, it's finally time for our last scene, and that's the music player scene. Let's go to our project panel. Let's close these and open up both of our music player files. So we've got the AI comp and the PSD comp. As always, let's copy the text over. I don't know why the text has gone bold, but yeah, let's just copy it over. Create, convert to editable text, and then this one, convert to editable text. And then we can delete both of these AI text layers. We have 2 different shape layers here. So we've got the music player box and these 2 circles. We can select both of these, which is music player box and buttons. Right click, create, and create shapes from vector layer. Then we can delete both of the AI files. And now we've just got the shape layers. Then let's enable 3D for everything. And let's make sure to set up the material options. So go into material options and turn off accept lights. Then we can copy this and we can select all of our layers. And whilst holding Command or Control, deselect the shape layers because we want these to be affected by lights. Then press Command V to paste those material options on. And lastly, let's not forget to turn on continuously rasterize for all of these layers. Select the top one, Shift select the bottom one, Command C, go back to our main comp, we'll go to 2, paste, and then left square bracket. I'm going to create a null object using the shortcut, left square bracket to bring it to the playhead, 3D, and I'm going to just rename this to iPhone null. Then I'm going to link all of these layers up to this null object. Hit P, and we can move this into position. Since the light is affecting our music player box, we can't see any of the text elements, but that's going to change shortly. So let me hit S and just make it a bit smaller. Can drag it down, something like that. Let's also drag in background 3. And this background is actually going to be inside of the iPhone shape. So I'm going to track map this to the iPhone shape. So it's within the boundaries. Then I'm going to press S to change the scale and just make it fit. Could drag it up a bit. And we also need a background behind all of this. Let's create a background ourselves. Hit layer, new, and then solid. And I'm going to just name this background. Hit left square bracket on the keyboard. And then let's drag this to the bottom. Then we can add the 4-color gradient effect. I'm going to change color 1 to white and color 4 to white, color 2 to like a light bluey purple. And we can use this color picker to do the same color here. Cool. Lastly, I think I want to make a stroke around this iPhone shape. So I'm going to select this iPhone shape. Since it's track matted with this background, it's already turned off. So we can right click, create shapes from vector layer, and we can drag this underneath. I'm just going to name this iPhone stroke. And then we can open it up. We can add a stroke effect. And this stroke, I'm going to make it black and just increase it slightly. That way it kind of looks like it's an actual iPhone. Our layers are looking a bit messy. It's hard to tell, what is what. What I'm going to do is select the slider up to the iPhone stroke. These are all the iPhone layers. So we can set this to a color. Then we've got the button and we've got the torch and the camera. So we could make all of these one color. And then we've got the music player box, the extras, player controls, and timeline. So we could make all of those one color as well. All right, and now let's just create the glass effects for the button outlines and the music player box outlines. I'm going to duplicate the glass effect from our last scene, and I'm going to place it here above music player box. Left square bracket on the keyboard to drag it to the playhead. We'll make it a bit bigger. We can also make it purple. We're going to need to do the glass effect twice because we've got 2 different shapes. So let's first do this one. I'm going to change the surface to the music player box outlines, which is number 8. So let's just find number 8. Here we go. The softness to 25. Height can be 60. Displacement, we can make it 100. The blurriness, we can set that to 25, and the brightness can be turned off. Let's track map this to the music player box. And here we've got our glass effect. Then let's just duplicate this music player box twice. One for the stroke and one for the drop shadow. Just like before, drag the drop shadow to the bottom, the stroke above the adjustment layer, turn both of them on. Let's find the drop shadow from our previous scene, copy these settings over, and you could set all of these settings up as presets, so you won't have to do this every single time. So let's place that onto the drop shadow, track map to this shape and invert, open the stroke, turn off the fill, add a stroke modifier, set it to overlay and 50%. So that's the glass effect set up for our music player box. Now we just need to do the same for the button outlines. So I'm going to duplicate this adjustment layer and drag it above button outlines, track it to this shape, open up surface in CC glass, and our bump map is the button outlines, which is number 14. So let's select number 14. For the softness, I'm going to lower it a bit to about 20 and also the height to 40. Then we need to add the stroke and the drop shadow. So duplicate this button outlines twice, stroke, drop shadow, drag the drop shadow under and the stroke above the adjustment layer, then turn both of them on, copy the drop shadow settings and paste it onto this layer, track map it, invert the track map, open the stroke, contents, we've got 2, so let's turn off the fill for both, then we can close them and add a stroke, and let's make sure that stroke is outside of the group and at the bottom. Then we can set it to overlay and 50%. Awesome. Let's just make this glass effect green, and we can link the stroke and the drop shadow for the buttons to the button's outlines. And we could do the same for the stroke and the drop shadow for the music player box. All right, and we've still got a bit more styling to do. So for the extras, I'm going to lower the opacity. So hit T and set the opacity to 50%. So that just made these have less opacity. In scene 2, we had our call animation zoom out. So for this one, we're going to have everything continue that zoom out animation as well. But first, I want this music player box and these circles to slide up. To do that, we're going to create two null objects, one for the music player box and all of the contents inside, and one for these buttons and the contents inside these. Select the first text and create a new null object. Let's make it 3D, call that music player. Let's link all of these up to extras, and then whilst holding command, select music player box and link that to music player, and then link music player to iPhone null. Now, if I change the position of the music player, you can see that all of the elements moves together. Then we can do the same for these buttons. So above camera, I'm going to create a new null and press left on the square bracket to bring it to the playhead. Let's just do the same with this one. Okay, and now select the camera, the torch, and the button's outlines, and drag it onto our null object. Drag the null object onto iPhone null, and just rename this to buttons null. So we can test this, hit P and move it around. And as you can see, our buttons are moving. Cool. So we've set up our null controllers. Now let's animate them. So I'm going to select the buttons null and the music player null. Hit P to open the position. And we're going to set a keyframe for the position. Let's move these keyframes over to about 220. And then at the start, at 2 seconds, we can drag this down to about here. Let's select all of these keyframes, F9 to easy ease, and let's just set up this curve to just be the max. So left all the way to the left and the right to the left. Just like that. We want to offset it a little bit so that this goes up first and then these buttons. I'm going to select the buttons now, and whilst holding shift, I'm going to select all of these green layers. And then we're going to move it over by about 3 frames. Let's see how that looks. Cool. I'm going to hit U to close the keyframes, and we need to do the zoom animation for the entry. Let's create a null object right at the top, hit left square bracket to center it. Let's just call this entry animation or in animation. Make it 3D, and we can link iPhone null to this entry animation. Since we created this null object now, the anchor point is in the center. We can press S to open the scale, set a keyframe, and we could move this keyframe over to about 225. Then let's increase the scale. Since we didn't link the background to the iPhone null, it's not scaling up. So let's make sure that's linked to the iPhone null. And now let's increase the scale to about 140. So this is what we'll have. Let's easy ease these keyframes. Let's drag the left all the way to the left and the right to the left. Now that looks really smooth. One more thing we could do is animate this timeline here. Since it is a music player, I'm going to duplicate this timeline, and the bottom timeline, I'm going to reduce the opacity to 50%. The top one, we're going to mask it so it moves along. So select the shape layer and let's create a mask about here. Open the mask settings, open mask path, and let's set this to the start. And then we can select the mask path and move it over a little, just like that. So now we've got this timeline moving along. There's a lot more you could do with these animations. You could animate the text, you could animate these buttons. It's all up to you. And that's pretty much all there is to this animation. Hope you found this video helpful, and if you want a part 2, then let me know in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.